In 2018, every farmer in Punjab did the same thing. They bought poison for worms. They gave it to every cow, every calf, every animal on the farm. They did not ask questions. This was the way things were done. This was normal. This was how farming worked. My name is Priya Sharma. My father, Rajesh Sharma, owned a farm with 50 acres and 60 cattle near a small village. We were normal farmers. We did what normal farmers did. Every 3 months, we bought dewormer powder from the cooperative. We mixed it with water. We gave it to all the animals. The cattle looked healthy. They made milk. We sold the milk. The money came every month. Nobody asked if there was another way. My father was a quiet man. He had farmed for 30 years. His father farmed before him. His grandfather built the first fence on this land. My father did not read books. He did not go to university. He knew cattle the way a carpenter knows wood. He knew by looking, by touching, by living with them every day. I was different. In 2018, I came home after finishing my degree at Punjab Agricultural University. I came home with a notebook full of ideas. I came home with papers and studies and theories. My father looked at this notebook the way a man looks at something he does not understand but thinks might be important. It was March 2019 when I first said the idea out loud. I had been thinking about it for months. I had read the papers. I had done the math. I was ready. The cooperative in the village had a room where farmers came every Tuesday morning. This was where information moved. This was where power lived. 30 farmers drank tea and talked about cattle and water and rain and money. Whatever you said in that room, the village knew it by evening. I went there one Tuesday to buy mineral supplement. While I was there, I said something. I do not know why I said it. Maybe I needed someone to hear it. Maybe I needed to speak it into the world. I said, I am going to put quail behind my cattle. The room went quiet. Then Rajendra Singh started laughing. Rajendra Singh was 63 years old. He was respected. He was successful. He had the biggest farm in the village. When he laughed, other people laughed. This was not mean laughter. It was patient laughter. The laughter of a man who has seen many young people come home with crazy ideas. He said, "Quail? Small birds behind big cattle?" Another farmer, Harpal, said, "The cattle will step on them." This is not a farm idea. This is a child's game. Rajendra said, "Beta, use poison like everyone else. That is what works. Forget about birds." I said nothing. I bought my mineral supplement. I left the room. But inside, something hardened. I decided they would see. I decided I would make the numbers so big and so clear that nobody could laugh anymore. I spent 2 months building. I built quail cages from wood and chicken wire. I bought 400 female quail from a hatchery in Chandigarh. I spent 25,000 rupees. It was all the money I had. My father watched me build. He did not help. He did not stop me. He just watched. One day he said, "If you are going to do this, do it right." In May 2019, I started the system on 10 acres. My father gave me 10 acres. Not the whole farm. But 10 acres was enough to begin. I divided the 10 acres into small pieces. I moved the cattle through one piece every 5 days. I moved the quail behind them 3 days later. This was the system I had read about in the papers. The quail would eat the worm babies that lived in the grass. The worm babies are small. They sit waiting to be eaten by cows. But the quail found them first. At the same time, I started collecting poop samples. Every animal's poop tells a story. It tells you how many worms are inside that animal. I collected from 8 animals every 2 weeks. I sent the samples to a lab in Ludhiana. The lab told me the numbers. I made a spreadsheet. This seemed strange to the village. Farmers did not make spreadsheets. But I was careful about it. I wrote down every animal, every test, every medicine, every date. I treated only the animals that had high worm numbers. The other animals I did not touch. My father walked the fields with me in June. He looked at the grass where the quail had been. He said, "The ground looks clean." For my father, this meant something. This meant he was starting to believe. The quail laid eggs. 400 quail made 300 eggs every day. I sold them at the market. I made 15,000 rupees in the first 4 months. This was money I did not expect. The results came back from the lab. Of 8 cattle tested on the quail land, only 1 had high worm numbers. On the rest of the farm, 5 of 8 cattle had high worm numbers. The quail land was cleaner. Much cleaner. In June 2019, something started to change across all of Punjab. The monsoon came early. The rains were very heavy. The fields became very wet. This was like opening the door for worms. Worms love wet ground. They grow faster. They spread faster. They make more babies. By July, farmers across the entire region were panicking. The cattle were getting sick. The worms were everywhere. The medicine was not working like before. The poison that used to kill 90% of worms now killed only 60%. In some farms, it killed only 50%. This is called worm resistance. This is what happens when you use the same poison for 30 years. The worms that are strong enough to survive the poison make babies. These babies are also strong. So the poison does not work anymore. You need more poison. Then even more poison. But the worms keep winning. Rajendra Singh tested his cattle in July. He found that 70% of them had very high worm numbers. He had to give expensive medicine. It cost 5,000 rupees per animal. Even then, it did not work well. Harpal had to sell 15 young cattle early. They were too sick. He could not save them. Other farmers used imported medicine. It cost 4 times more than normal medicine. But still the worms were winning. The farmers were losing money. The cattle were getting thinner. The milk production went down. By August, the village was full of worry. This was a crisis. Nobody had seen worm resistance before. Nobody knew how to fight it. But something different was happening on my farm. I tested my cattle in July. The worm numbers were low. Lower than when I started in May. This should not have been possible. The wet weather should have made the worms multiply. But they did not multiply on my land. Why? Because the quail were eating them. The worms could not learn to fight the quail. They could not develop resistance to birds eating them. The worm babies never reached the cattle because they were already in the quail's stomach. In August, I tested again. Same result. Low numbers. Very low numbers. I treated only 12 animals all monsoon season. Normal farms treated every animal 2 or 3 times. My medicine cost was 9,600 rupees for the whole farm. A normal farm with the same number of cattle used 60,000 rupees. Maybe more. My cattle were healthy. Their coats were shiny. Their eyes were bright. They were gaining weight. The milk production was high. The dairy company paid more because the milk quality was better. The village saw this. They could not help but see. The difference was too big to ignore. Rajendra Singh came to my farm one day in August. He did not call first. He just came. He walked the fields with me. He looked at the cattle. He looked at the grass. He asked questions. How much does the quail food cost? What happens if a quail gets sick? What happens if the weather changes? I had answers because I had been living this system for 4 months. He listened. He did not smile. But something in him was listening. Something was starting to believe. In October 2019, I had 6 months of data. I made a final spreadsheet. I showed it to my father. On the 10 acres with quail. Average worm number, 35 eggs per gram. Animals treated, 12 out of 60. Medicine cost, 9,600 rupees for whole farm. Quail egg income, 45,000 rupees. Cattle health, excellent. Cattle weight gain, 2.4 kilograms per day. On the rest of the farm without quail. Average worm number, 110 eggs per gram. Animals treated, 45 out of 60. Medicine cost, 54,000 rupees for whole farm. Cattle health, poor to medium. Cattle weight gain, 1.8 kilograms per day. My father looked at these numbers for a long time. He did not say anything. Then he said, "Next year, we do the whole farm." This was the biggest thing he had said to me in my entire life. This was him saying, "I believe you." This was him saying, "You are right." Rajendra Singh came to my house in October. His son came with him. He said, "Priya, I want to learn everything." I walked him through the entire system. I showed him the quail cages. I showed him how to move them. I showed him the rotation map. I showed him the spreadsheet. I showed him the lab results. I explained the science. I explained how quail disrupt the worm life cycle. I explained targeted selective treatment. I explained why you must measure everything. He took notes. He asked good questions. He said, "Can I start this on my farm?" I said, "Yes. Start small. Start on 10 acres like I did." By November, Rajendra had quail on 10 acres. Harpal came to see the system. He asked questions. He also wanted to start. The cooperative owner ordered quail supplies. By December, 5 farms in the village had quail systems. By the end of 2020, 20 farms had them. By 2021, 40 farms had them. The veterinarian for the government started recommending the system. She said, "This is the only way to fight worm resistance in the long term. If farmers keep using old ways, the worms will win completely. There will be no medicine that works. But if they use quail and testing, they can fix the problem." The laughter from the Tuesday morning meeting had disappeared. Nobody talked about it anymore. They talked about numbers instead. They talked about cattle that were healthier. They talked about money saved. They talked about the future. Today in 2024, I farm the same land that my father started with. I have 800 quail in portable cages. I rotate cattle through a system based on numbers, not tradition. I test the cattle poop every 2 weeks. I treat only the animals that need treatment. Medicine cost per animal per year, 400 rupees. Before the system, 3,500 rupees. That is almost 10 times less. Quail egg income, 180,000 rupees per year. This is more than all other costs combined. The quail have become the main business. The cattle are healthier. They make more milk. The milk company pays more for better quality. My father retired from day-to-day work in 2022. But he still walks the fields every morning. He still checks the cattle the same way he always has. He looks at their eyes. He looks at their coats. He looks at the way they walk. Now he also looks at the quail cages. Sometimes he moves a cage that has blown in the wind. He does not say much about it. But he is there. 52 farms in the village now use quail systems. The cooperative has a card at the counter with information about poop testing. The veterinary clinic teaches classes every month. Rajendra Singh says, "This is the best thing that has happened to farming in 30 years. Harpal, who shook his head at the idea, now has 500 quail on his farm. In 2023, my daughter was born. I named her Mira. When she turned 3, she would walk with me through the farm. She watched the quail moving behind the cattle. One day she asked, 'Mummy, why do the birds always follow the cows?' I told her, 'The birds eat the bad bugs that make the cows sick. So the cows stay healthy.' She thought about this. Then she asked, 'What if the cows eat something that keeps the bad bugs away?' She was too small to have the big words. But she was asking about bioactive forages. I had read papers about plants that have natural chemicals to fight worms. I had not tried them yet. The farm was already working well. I told her, 'That is a good question. Let us look into it.' I went to my desk and pulled out a folder about these plants. She held it with both hands. She could not read. But she held it like it was important. They laughed when she pastured her quail behind the cattle. They laughed because it was strange. They laughed because she was young and they were old. They laughed because change is frightening. But then the worm resistance spread. It spread across the region like water finding low ground. It spread because the old way does not work anymore. The worms learned. The poison does not kill them like before. And when the resistance spread, when the crisis came, when the medicine stopped working, the only thing that could save the farms was what they had laughed at. The quail. The data. The measurement. The system. The laughter stopped. The quail stayed. The cattle became healthy. The farms became strong. And one girl who came home from university with a notebook became the reason that farming changed in her village. This is how real change happens. Not with anger. Not with fighting. Not with loud voices. It happens with patience. It happens with numbers. It happens with quail walking behind cattle. It happens with one person willing to be laughed at until the world catches up. It happens when you measure. When you test. When you listen to your data instead of listening to the laughter. The worm resistance spread across Punjab because the old way had failed. Her quail system spread because the new way works. That is the whole story.